Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Quality Week 2022, organized by the Colombo Quality Camp and sponsored by our strategic partner 99X. I'm Dhiren De Silva, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. So it's actually exciting to see this many participants for this year's Quality Week session. And we welcome you once again to the day one of Quality Week 2022. So we have got two amazing sessions lined up for today, and we hope you all will stick around for both of them. So on behalf of Colombo Quality Camp, I would like to invite Chamal Pereira to give you the welcome note. So over to you, Chamal.
Hi, Dhiren, and hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I would like to welcome all of you for the Quality Week 2022. And to give you a brief introduction about who we are and what we are going to do, we are CQC or Colombo Quality Camp, and we started this journey in 2017. So the intention or the purpose of setting up this CQC was to improve the quality awareness as well as to bridge the gap between software engineers as well as the QA engineers. So over the years, we hosted many events. We did many technical session, non-technical session to improve the awareness of quality QA community. So this QA week is our signature event. So this is the third consecutive year that we are doing this. And this time also, we are having a lot of light panelists for this quality week. And this time we have 3 foreign speakers as well as 7 local speakers, Sri Lankan speakers as well. So like Dhiren mentioned, we have 2 amazing sessions lined up for each days from starting today to it will go till Friday. So I am going to warmly welcome all of you again for this session, and make sure to ask questions, interact with speakers, and more importantly, enjoy the session and get something out of it. Over to you, Dhiren.
All right. So thank you, Chamal, for that wonderful introduction. Now, as Chamal mentioned, Quality Week runs through a span of 5 days, starting today. So we would like to encourage you to join us across all 5 days because the sessions that we have got lined up will definitely enrich and enlighten your knowledge and your experience in your day-to-day work life. Having said that, before we kickstart our sessions for the day, let me kindly remind you to type in any questions that you have for our speakers in the chat, and our speakers will answer them at the end of each session. And we would also like to humbly request you to spare some of your precious time in filling out the survey that we will be mailing to your registered mail address at the end of the session, at the end of the sessions, actually. And of course, our crew will also be posting the links to these surveys after each of the sessions. So you can probably have a look at it at that moment as well. So with that said, let me introduce our first speaker for today, who is also a keynote speaker. So he has a collective experience of over 19 years in the software industry and has provided UX consultations for over 100 different products across multiple domains for customers across the globe, predominantly in the European region. He is also considered one of the go-to UX persons in the UX community in Sri Lanka. Now, this is due to the insanely simple explanations and the practical oriented teaching methods he possesses. So please welcome our keynote speaker for the day, Rasika Mahindasiri, Senior UX Architect at 99X, here to provide an insight on assuring the user experience. Over to you, Rasika.
Thank you, Dhiren, and I must thank the organizing committee of this Quality Week for giving me this opportunity to address this wonderful audience. And well, if it is a physical gathering, then I could see wonderful faces of you guys. But unfortunately, we live in an era where physical events are like, I don't say it won't happen, but mostly the preferred method is online. So I beg your pardon. I don't see you guys. If I see your faces, then it's wonderful. My name is Rasika Mahindasiri. I'm a user experience designer, and well, I have quite a lot of experience. I've been in, that just tells you on one thing, that I'm older than most of you guys, and I have seen the evolution of the software industry in Sri Lanka. So I have, when you meet these old people, what you could expect is they could tell you stories like, that is how it is when we were kids, those kind of stories I could tell you. But without sparing any more time, let me share my screen. So I have a story to tell you. So I'm going to share my entire screen because I might want to go back and forth between certain things time to time. So today, what I'm going to speak to you about is assuring the user experience. Now, before we begin, I have to set a ground rule here. I have to set a very strict ground rule. That is, all I'm telling you is based on what I have experienced over the last 19 to 20 years. So when somebody, speaks out his experience, two things could happen. One is like, you might feel like I'm bragging about myself. Because I have to use the words like I did this and we did that, and those were the days, those kind of things would come. And the other one is, since I speak my experience might contradict with what you have gone through, or what you have read in a book, or have seen in a video. So there might be there's little contradiction points. So I have all the reasons to back what I say, but you have to decide what to believe. So keeping those points in mind, let's proceed. So today my goal is not to teach you what or how to design user experience. No, I won't be able to do that in half an hour. If I'm to teach you that, it will take weeks and weeks and weeks, because it's a complex process. But what I'm trying to do is, if you see what user experience is and how to do it, it is so complex and misunderstood. And what I'm trying to do is to structure your knowledge about user experience and to give an idea about which is which. For example, if you look at this particular picture, I won't be able to explain you everything, but after the session, you might feel like, okay, if I'm to, take off, what area should I be looking at? Or if I'm to, to have the speed breaks, what area should I be looking for? So that's my goal here. It's not to, give you in-depth knowledge of how to design user experience in any product, because it is a very complex and time-consuming thing to explain you. So let's proceed. Now, user experience design is often misunderstood, and I think it is the most misunderstood word in software industry. Why? Because whenever people talk about user experience, people tend to picture the interfaces, and then people tend to look at that UI guy or the UI UX or whatever you call him. So you tend to look at that person. But let me give you the proper idea, the proper bigger picture of how everything connects in terms of user experience. So now, in a software, there are many things, many different things and many different people involving. So, and if we list some of these guys, like UI people, dev, testing, security, project management, delivery, there are so many people involved in creating a software. Now, where do you think the user experience happens? Where do you think the user experience is designed or user experience happens? It is not in this level. It is none of these levels. User experience happens when somebody involves or somebody, get to use whatever the product that you have built and whatever the software, it acts as a solution for some problem, some concern, it could be anything. So when the people engage with whatever the thing that you have provided, that is where the user experience happens. Because user experience stands for user experience. Don't look any further. Don't look any further. It is user experience, what somebody would experience, what somebody would go through. So that is the emotional thought process that runs in your head when you're engaging with something. For example, even now when you're listening to what I'm saying, you might go through several, things. So that is your experience. So when you sum up all these thoughts, you would say whether this is good or bad or useless or whatever that thing. So if user experience happens there, where should we design the user experience? None of us can design the user experience at this bottom layer. So user experience has to be designed at that top layer. If you don't believe me now, just tell me if you're using any of the applications or any of the products, maybe in your mobile or in your laptop, just because it has a nice UI, just because it's built with the modern day technology, cutting edge technology. No, nobody does it. You use any application because it solves something for you. So it caters something for you. That is how the user experience happens. So if that is the case, we need to design the user experience at this top layer. And then whatever the things that we do here, UI, dev, testing, security, all these things has to be aligned to deliver what we have designed at this top layer. So if I'm to, break it down to a few different layers now, the total solution happens here. So that is where you design the user experience. And then you need to, pass certain attributes we call quality attributes. Have you ever heard of this term, quality attributes? May not be by the name of it, but if you have heard of things like, usability, performance, and maintainability, so many abilities are there in terms of quality attributes. So we have to design a proper solution. In user experience terms, we call it design user journeys. So a solution is a collection of user journeys. So that is what we do at the top part. And then we understand certain quality parameters, which needs to be, we need to make sure that we deliver these quality attributes as we planned using all these bottom layers. Now, if you think that it's a UI guys thing, now let me tell you an example. Let's take Facebook, for example. If you don't like Facebook, then think of Instagram for that matter. And you go somewhere and you take a picture of yourself. You take a selfie, and you try to upload it to upload it to your wall. And the progress bar goes 10%, 20%, 70%, 80%, 90%, doom, or error. Is that a nice user experience that you go through? Think of it. Is that something that UI guy could do? Fix? No. That is a development mistake, and the QA guys, even whoever the people who tested it, have not caught it. Now, think of there's a rumor that there's a security loophole in Facebook, and your account is getting hacked. And up to now, there are like millions of accounts are being hacked. And this actually has happened a few years ago. And is that a nice user experience to you? No. So who's the responsible party for it? Now just think that your Facebook wall takes like ages to load. Is that a nice user experience? No. Now who's the responsible party for it? So user experience design and UI design are quietly, drastically two different things. And to design user experience, it takes several practices and things. Once you have designed the preliminary user experience, you need to inherit it down to, you need to pass it down to several aspects, several parties as quality attributes, where these people need to make sure that these quality attributes are being met. So these quality attributes are predominantly geared towards making the application work. It can be used by people. However, if your solution is wrong, then none of these things does matter. None of these things does matter. So you have to design the right solution first and the quality attribute. So if you look at all these things, I will try to point you out the famous applications, a few famous applications where they make mistakes at the what do you call, the solution level, as well as the quality attribute level, where the implementation level. So before that, I will explain this one. Now, I'm not going to go through any of these things, how to design the user experience. I won't be able to cover anything here. So if you have ever heard of these things, like the problem identification, empathy, ideation, brainstorming, solution design, interact, all these things do come into play at the top level, and the quality attributes pass into. Now, if you are a user experience designer, designated user experience designer, then you could do, if you're somebody who's capable of designing visual, the aesthetic part of it, then you can do visual designing, and you can do usability refinements, as well as the implementation. All these things do come into play at this tier 2. So that is how the game happens. Now, most people do fail where they try to design user experience at the tier 2. Once the solution is designed, then absolutely there's nothing you can do if the solution is wrong, because all your efforts here are being put into this application is a waste if your solution is wrong. Now, remember, solution is a collection of user journeys which one or many parties involved in providing a particular service or activity. Now, solution level failures. If you remember this experience, if you're a Facebook fan, if you have used Facebook for like more than 5-6 years, I think you should remember this thing called explore feed in Facebook. What happened was, by that time, Facebook has got so many complaints regarding the clutterness of their newsfeed. So many unwanted things are being pushed into their newsfeed by so many other pages. Like, there are so many pages. Now, even if you look at now, there are so many fun pages, political agenda running pages, sports pages, so many pages. So when Facebook company receives this as a complaint, what they did was, as a solution, they divided the newsfeed into 2. One is the friends and family news feed where all your friends and family stuff are being posted. And the other one is called the Explore feed, where all these fun pages and your all these advertising campaigns, all these are moved into that Explore feed. So it is being represented as 2 tabs. Now this is how it looked in mobile. Now once they ran this as a test, they got to know 3 different results. Many people said this sucks, this doesn't work. Many people said. Number 2, some said, yes, this is brilliant. This is exactly what we need. And there's quite a lot of people who didn't even notice this. So now this is being launched in 6 countries, 5 or 6, I'm not sure. Sri Lanka is one of those countries. And I hope some of you maybe remember this. So now, where did this user experience is being designed? The moment somebody made that decision, okay, we are going to divide this the wall into 2, and we put these things into this part and these things into that part. At that point, 90% of the user experience is designed. So whatever the things do happen next is like, how to represent that in a screen and how to implement it, how to code it, all these things happens next. And since this is a failure at the solution level, none of those latter things didn't matter. You get my point here. So that is what we call user experience level, the solution level failures. So there's another thing for solution level failure. As a solution concept, whatever the thing that you may suggest could work. But the user journeys, how you have designed your user journeys, could kill them. Kill it as a solution. So that implies, if the same solution concept is there and you design the user journey in 2 different ways for that solution concept, there could be repercussions where one might fail and the other might success. So that happens. Now, if you have seen this picture and try to decode why this happens, it's because of that. You design the solution, you design the user journey in a way, whereas people might find it due to various reasons, people might use it in a different way. For example, if I try to give you a popular ATMs, a couple of popular ATMs in Sri Lanka. One is the NSB ATM. If you have gone to an NSB, it is full of those little paper bills, full of these little paper bills. And if those paper bills are not there, 2 things. If one ATM isn't working, and the other one is it has no papers. Now, if you go now, you don't see this because there's no papers in the ATM. But if you look at why it happens, now if you go to some other bank like Sampath or Commercial for that matter, let's take Sampath. If you go there, you see as much as bills that you have seen in the NSB ATM. Why is that? It's the same solution concept, ATM. But there are 2 different user journeys. For example, the ATM solution where the NSB has, you go there, you select the language, you select, I'll take the cash withdrawal journey. You select cash withdrawal from the menu, then you need to enter the PIN again, and you need to enter the amount. And then they ask, do you want to print a receipt? And most people now at this point, now I'm not trying to teach you how to design a user experience, but at this point, you have not given a particular reason why am I asking this question? As do you want to print a receipt? Since I'm a bit reluctant, I don't know, I'm uncertain. I say yes. I say yes. That is one reason. And the other reason happens, then it dispenses cash, and then it asks whether you want to do another transaction. But now there's a fundamental concern when you're dealing with this money entities. That is the account balance. Now, in any of these journey steps, that concern of showing you the account balance is not being addressed. So what happens is, if you say no to this print button, what happens is you have to re-enter the menu, re-enter the pin and go through this journey again and select view account balance and view the account balance. So when people realize that, even he's somebody who's concerned about the environment and everything, what happens is, since that is such a pain, what he does is you say yes, where you get the receipt with the balance and you throw it to the bin and you go. Whereas in the Sampath ATM, if you go there, now you might get confused. What are these things? Like I said, I'm not going to explain how to design a user journey here, but there are certain things that we take into consideration when you're designing a user journey, something called technical delightments. So where we can make people's lives better using the technology. So what happens is their user journey goes, you select the withdrawal option, show amount with balance, and enter the amount, dispense cash, show balance with, at the end of the transaction, and ask them, do you want to print? Most people say, no, I don't want to print. So what my point is, even if the solution is the same, the solution concept is same, two different user journeys could have two different user experience, and one might, be a failure. So if we come to a level one below from that level, failures in quality attributes. So your solution is fine, and then your user journeys are fine, and quality attribute level failures. Now, if you remember this, the moment it came, now it works fine. The moment it came, if you remember that, it was a massive failure. Nobody was able to register in this application, and people were getting wrong QRs with wrong vehicle numbers, and they were like, even I was hopeless. Like, how could I get registered here? So what's the failure? It's the performance. It's the performance. Solution is right. User journey is right. UI is right. But the quality attribute level, it's a failure. And if I may tell you another example for a quality attribute failure, if you remember the My Dialogue app. I'm sorry if there's somebody who's in Dialogue. It takes ages to load. If you have experienced that, then that kills the user experience. That kills the user experience, performance. So the key parts, there are so many quality attributes you need to look into. But mostly, at least usability and performance you need to test if you have to assure good user experience. So there are three levels, like I explained. Solution level, quality attribute level. Solution level also have two different things, like solution concept level as well as the user journey level. Do you get it? Now I have not explained anything about how to perform these tasks, which I'm not going to do. All my goal is to explain you how everything connects. So if you have to design user experience at the very beginning, then you need to design the proper solution, proper user journeys, then inherit those or pass those quality attributes to people who are designing, who's performing the other activities. So this is how it goes. We call it the tier 1 user experience design. And if you may have heard the terms like product design and everything, yes, it refers the same. So you first design those user experience, tier 1 user experience. And the output of this tier 1 user experience design could be a set of wireframes, maybe low fidelity prototype set. Sometimes if you want to test it with the users, you might create high fidelity prototypes with, with nice user interfaces, but that is not necessary all the time. So what happens is you design that user experience and you pass those quality user experience aspect or the quality attributes. Then the visual designing people who are the people who's designing the user interface, they could do their work, enhancing usability. Then the UI implementation, the front-end component, those things go like that. And the initial dev work can be started, creating the structure or the skeleton for the architecture, development architecture. And the QA, test design, can be done once this preliminary tier 1 user experience design is done. So that is how a software company should work collaboratively with each other when you are designing a proper product. Now, I will explain here a little bit about how QA can contribute to this process. Now, what's the process? Solution design layer, quality attribute layer, and what are the things that you need to keep in mind when you're working on these particular silos? Those things are the quality attributes. Now, for example, devs are the ones that should be responsible mainly for the performances, as well as some of the usability aspects. But UI guys, they have the greater responsibility in designing the usability. So when you're testing, so if anybody is interested in how to do those tier 1 UX design activities, I have written a book. I don't want to market it right here, but if you are interested in, then you can go to this website and see what that is. And as a QA, you should be able to contribute in terms of these two things at least, usability and performance. Now there's a session for usability testing. Will be done by Gimhani tomorrow. I think she will cover most of these things to the core. So I'm not going to explain you how to perform usability test. Performance test, I think you might have heard of how to do performance testing. If you have not, you can go through some of these articles. And I have seen some people, you don't believe me, some people, some QAs, they even test the maintainability up to a certain extent. For example, if it is a design system driven development project, I have seen where some of these QAs do test where you have used the right component, where you have used the right button, or you have taken a button and make it look like a button. So there are certain people going to that level to see the maintainability. If you look at those big companies whose performance are suck in their applications, it is due to maintainability, not that they know that they don't know that their performance is not there in the application, but they can't do anything about it because the maintainability is gone now. In Sinhalese, we call it Massatono, where you build a feature and then you build another feature on top of that one, and you build another feature. So at that point, you only care about that particular feature, and up to after some time, then nobody dare to touch that code and to clean it. So then the maintainability is gone there. So there are a few things you finally need to understand: quality versus experience. Now, if you have heard the term, quality is subjective. How the quality is subjective? Because it binds with the experience. Now, experience is the expectation or the thought process that goes through those people who are willing to contribute, who are willing to use your application. So you need to keep in mind that adhering to a guideline always doesn't mean that it delivers the right user experience. If you don't believe me, now, if you have ever gone to Goldface and have Isowade, what are the food guidelines or the methodology or anything in that aspect? What are those things cover? If you have gone to Pilavs and have an ice Milo, you know what I mean, after a rough night or a heavy night, what are the quality standards those things, those restaurants provide? Nothing. So it's the experience. First, you need to understand what the experience that these people are looking for. So to do that, you need to know what happens in this tier one. You need to keep a close contact with those guys who are performing those tasks, and to know what the users are. Number one, you need to know who your users are, and they're capable. I mean, they're we call it the persona in user experience terms. What kind of people are those guys? You need to know your users, because if you don't know who are going to use this application, then how can you make sure that it works for them? So you need to know your users, and you need to know the real scenarios, real user scenarios, at what point these people are doing. For example, there could be a situation where we deal with a low tech savvy, not so educated kind of a user group. So that we pick, there's something called interaction design patterns when we are designing the application. So we pick interaction design patterns based on the characteristics of these user groups. So if it is low tech savvy and not so educated, then we tend to go with, you know, Baba type of features, not so high-tech kind of interaction design pattern. Whereas a QA could come and say that this is not modern, look at that application, look at this application, and this is not modern, you have not done a good job. And it takes ages to explain the QA guy, no, this is why we have designed it like that. So you need to know these things to avoid these collisions. If you know your users, just as the user experience guy, then you could test the application with a great deal of accuracy. And whenever you do usability testing, you need to eliminate the word "I think." I have seen many times QA guys do come with several bugs, like, you know, I think it's better if we move this one here. No, that is not how you do it. You need to have facts. You need to have an agreed guideline for that particular project. Now, what I mean by agreed guideline, not every guideline is applicable for every project or every product. So you, at the very beginning, you need to agree upon, okay, these are our users, these are our scenarios, and we follow these kind of usability guidelines. So agreed guideline. So if there's any violation in that aspect, you could say that, all right, look here, you have violated this. That is a fact. And the other one is a tested result. You test it with the user for usability, and you found that these people aren't getting your application very well. So that is a fact. So eliminate the fact, I think, and come to the techie guys or the UI or the user experience guys and say, I think you should move this. No, don't do this. And last but not least, if you have done everything, like your solution works perfectly, your quality attributes are being, you know, tested properly, everything is done, and you have some time left in your, I mean, before the deadline, you have some time left, then go for pixel perfection. Keep it to the last. Because a bug that you report after testing with some users, and or testing against a particular usability guideline and say that you have violated this, is 1,000 times better than you come and say that, hey, look, in Chrome it is 19 pixels and in Firefox it is 20 pixels. Think about it. So there are so many areas that you can contribute to user experience, assuring the user experience. So I think there's nobody prevent you from doing it. At least do the usability testing, at least, for performance. It'll make lives better for their users. Right, thank you. that is what I wanted to say, at least to give you that idea of different levels of user experience.
All right, Rasika. Thank you so much for that insightful discussion on assuring the user experience. And now we will begin our Q&A session. So if you already haven't typed in your questions in the chat, please do so now, and Rasika will respond to them. I already did notice there were quite a few questions in the chat, posted in the chat. So Rasika, over to you again.
Yes, there's one question. Pasindu Surasingh asks, do you have any experience with ATM UI? ATM machine, they have some mandatory physical event. Yes, they do have some mandatory things that needs to be presented with every ATM UI. For the first question, that I haven't designed any bank's ATM, but I have involved in some teams where they have done it. So those mandatory things, the ones that I explained, that has nothing to do with the mandatory things. It is some I won't use the word idiotic, but I couldn't find a better word than that. So some user journey mistakes that they have done in terms of designing the experience. So some of our bank requirements, yes, some of our bank requirements. Now, what kind of requirements? For example, there are mandatory requirements which is governed by the law. And all the other requirements which is not governed by the law can be changed. Now, how can it be changed? Now, we live in a country where people perform certain things and say that I can't do anything. That's how I was advised. I know this is wrong. But don't say that. If you are a user experience designer, you prove the fact that this doesn't work. This has these problems. Now, I have my experience with Sri Lankan banks, are not so good, because every time that I try to prove a point that this doesn't work, what these decision-making people are saying, even the head of that division. There's one bank I have been consulted to, design their payment wallet. So I tried to prove a point that no, the way that you're approaching is completely wrong because of these. I have my points. Now, what this guy said was, I know, Machan, I understand what you're saying, but the board has made the decision, Machan can't help. So now, then I said, okay, I come to the board, you arrange a meeting with the board. I will present these facts and enlighten the board that this doesn't work. Then what he said was, no, Macha, you can't meet the board like that. Then I had to give up. I didn't go through with the consultancy because I know it's a failure, and it was a failure. It is a failure even now. So you guys now, it's his job to rectify those challenges. If that is not bound by legal constraints, then those should be changed by the entity, the bank entity. Now, who needs to be provide that guideline? Maybe the user experience designer. Maybe the user experience designer could present those facts to his superior. Then his superior can go to his superior. Eventually, it needs to be reached the top. So if you say that, can't do anything because of those are bank requirements, then nothing will happen. So which one a tester should focus more, UX or performance? Now, the user experience testing, those things are being done by the user experience designer, where the user journey works fine and whether we have the right solution. Those are being done at the preliminary design level by the user experience guy. So when it comes to quality attribute level, it is usability and the performance mainly. So if you ask the question, usability or the performance, I would say both, because both has a great level of impact to a product's success. If you don't believe me, look at my dialogue app. I'm sorry, I don't want to criticize anybody, but the performance is like, you have to tap on something and you have to wait till the data loads, and you have to tap on something and then again wait till the data loads, and it's a performance. So usability, performance, they go hand in hand. So I would say both. Could you please briefly explain the solution concept layer? I'm sorry, I won't be able to do that now, because if I'm to explain it in briefly, it would take about at least two hours, I would say. Go to my website. I have given some free content there. So if you read it, you will get to know what this is. There are free chapters, like 5-6 chapters free. As a QA, yes, we do test as a user, and if we identify that these bugs are and concerns. But my project, our PO always say, this is MEP, so let's keep it to minimal. Is this valid or not? Like as a QA, we know we need to fix it to attract the user more, but due to peers restriction, we are unable to do it. Now, this constant battle with PO has a cause. He has a agenda in mind. So, like I said at the very beginning, how to change PO's mind is just by explaining him the impact, the severity of the impact of what you're telling. So for example, when you're, now this goes with that solution level thing, solution layer. If that is a key user journey, yes, then it has a greater impact. If it is a not so key user journey, it's a minor user journey, or it's something, some user journey which has been used by not so important user group in your application, and the likelihood of you using that kind of a user journey is very rare. So there are several different types of user journeys in your application. So if you're trying to point out not so important user journey concern, PO will say no. And I think he's right. So if it is a key user journey problem, key user journey is the user journey which make or break your application. If it is something like that, then it's your job to, present the PO with all these facts, the severity of the impact. If you fail to do this, then I haven't, in my experience, in such cases, I haven't seen any PO say no. If a PO says no, either I haven't pitched my points right, or I haven't understood the application right. So every time I try to pitch it in a way that this is a key user journey, and if we fail this point, then that's done and dusted. So every time, if the impact is that severe, then the POs would say yes. So that is why I say understand your users, understand the real scenarios. Then you know which is important and which is not. Then you know how to pitch it to the client. So that is about it. Oh my God, so many questions. Niroshan would kill me. I think I'm taking his time. Nicely done the presentation with better example. Thank you very much. My pleasure if you understand something. Any other blog posts that we could refer UX more? There are so many UX blog posts in the web, for example, UX magazine. There are so many Medium articles you could read, but you have to be, be very cautious. Now, I have seen people copy certain other people's articles and, try to put it there as something that they wrote without, knowing what they're talking about. So you always have to look for the author. Why am I trusting this guy? So whatever the blog post you read, look for the author, look for his credibility. Then only you could, rely on what he says, because nowadays nobody knows you are a potato in social media. And I've seen so many people, pumping articles to Medium and so many other platforms without knowing jack shit of what they're talking about. Be careful with the author. Anonymous attendee, what are the approach to making websites and platforms accessible to all user groups? Now, I haven't touched upon accessibility here, because to Sri Lankans, accessibility is like meh. something like that. If you don't believe me, go to a supermarket car park and wait like 5 minutes, and somebody would come and park their car in that disability car park and go and ask why you don't care about accessibility. But anyway, accessibility is a requirement by law for most countries. If you go to European Union as well as USA, so there are certain guidelines that you need to adhere to in terms of accessibility. So in such cases, you have to perform. I mean, you have to adhere to whatever the rules that those guys are being explained in those guidelines.
Sorry to interrupt the discussion, Rasika.
There are so many other questions.
Yeah, there are so many questions. And I think Rasika wouldn't mind if you add him up on LinkedIn and could forward those questions for those that couldn't be answered. But in any case, thank you so much, Rasika, once again for the session, as well as for the responses for the questions, because and also I have to take this time to thank the audience for keeping the chat lively and active with questions. So Rasika, thank you once again for joining us. And with that, I guess
one more thing, I need to
sorry.
apologize from Niroshan. I have eaten up some of your time. I'm sorry. I there were so many questions. So like, bye-bye.
Yes. So I guess next up, we have our second speaker for today. So given the fact that the Sri Lanka, we all go through several troubles, so we must take time to appreciate our second speaker for joining us amidst all these issues. So the next speaker is actually an agile delivery manager in organizations, or he acts as an agile delivery manager in organizations to deliver high-profile projects and optimize delivery strategies. And he is also an agile coach, helping organizations with agile transformation strategies. And last but not least, as a speaker, he aims to educate and inspire his audience by sparking discussion and motivate change through game-changing agile strategies. So our next speaker, speaking on the topic siloed testing to agile testing, is Niroshan Madampitige, who is the head of projects at Vetstoria and the co-founder of International Orcs Alliance. So Niroshan, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the great introduction, and hello everyone. Glad to speak to you. Unfortunately, just to do a check-in myself, I'm going through unforeseen trouble, which is a power cut. I had to travel outstation, and I had planned everything except the power. However, I'm joining here, so I hope I should be able to still add value to your knowledge, despite the challenges I'm going through, right? So I'm really sorry if there will be any distraction, but I'm trying to minimize that. So with that, let's start. So I'm gonna do a bit of what you call challenging to what you would consider as your QA strategy. So let me start the talk here, right? Now, maybe you can answer that verbally, or you can try to just chat the response to over the Zoom chat. Zoom chat. So the question is this, right? So in your testing practices, just tell me if you don't see that you have dev QS separation. If you do have, don't respond, but if you don't have the separation, clear separation in your processes, just say yes. Anyone who can say yes to, yes, I don't have, or our team, our organization don't have dev QA separation. Can I see some responses? Yeah, so I'm gonna inviting that I'm gonna go through the talk. Here's the deal. 9 out of 10 companies and teams that I have been working for the last decade in Sri Lanka
And Niroshan, I think we can't hear you.
Oops, what about now?
Yes, now it's back.
Okay, so didn't you hear anything?
It was just for a few seconds. You can
Okay,
continue.
got it. Yeah, so here's the deal, right? So in most of our companies in Sri Lanka, we have this separation between devs and QAs. The simple reason that I see is this. In our education system, we are groomed as two different experts in our learning journey, right? Example, we still, in our education system, right, we still have software engineering stream, quality assurance stream. How we get into one of these streams is very strange. Sometimes you don't know where we are getting into, right? However, there's interest around software engineering. There's a bit of a pride around it. And when you start your software engineering journey, you tend to hang on to that particular pride a bit too much, right? The other thing is this, right? So no offense, QA, like just think of how you got into QA, right? You probably thought software engineering is a bit of a too much technicality for you. And you thought, well, and the hope is that it's comparatively less complex / easy / a good way to start your IT or technical journey, right? No problem with that, right? However, the problem is when it comes to them departments, in other words, we call different QA. The problem is this, right? It's okay to have these two units because these are two distinctive streams, expert areas, right? However, the modern world is not ready to consider that separation and believe that you're going to produce the best quality results having that separation clear. Example, if you are a software engineer, if you have a mindset, hey, I'm a software engineer, my job is to do the coding and QAs are there to test it, I will tell you that you're going to fail miserably in the coming years to come, because the companies or the clients are not ready to consider that separation because it's irrelevant for them, right? If you are a QA who is saying, hey, my job is to wait for your code, and when you say, hey, ready to test the code, that is when my job starts, you're also going to fail, right? Professionally as well as proven to fail. Get it? This comes from metric organizations. This comes from functional organizations, which are not going to work for the next decade, right? That is why most of the organizations are moving towards agility as well as various other concepts around agile and lean. We are not ready to waste our time. We are not ready to make our processes exhaustive. We are not ready to have this conflict between software engineers and QAs and impact our processes, impact the timeline and the quality of it, right? So now, with that, I'm going to move on to this theme from siloed testing to agile testing. Why I wanted to explain these two silos is simply because my theme is around that, right? Now, if you want to be an agile team, particularly want to be agile testers, you need to get out of that mindset. You might be, your expertise might be QA, right? That's perfectly all right. But you can't be just thinking your job is to test something that is handed over to you. No, it's not going to work that way. So I'm going to give you 3 strategies for you to go and try out in your processes, right? Here's what Agile means. Agile is primarily based on empiricism. Empiricism is, basically 3 things, 3 pillars. 1, inspection. 2nd, adaptation. Sorry, first is transparency. 2nd is inspection. 3rd is adaptation. It's around deliver something. If you want to develop a software, you start creating transparent around what you do, and then you sufficiently. How do you allow that? Through transparency. So if you do not have enough transparency so that people in your team, within your stakeholder groups can see what's going on, you will not be able to do the right level of inspection. So through inspection, you're going to do the right level of adaptation. That is changing what needs to change based on your observations, right? Now, from there, let's go into the next topic, right? So let me ask you, right? What sounds like a traditional siloed testing strategy? I'll tell you how it works, right? So you have software engineers, you have quality engineers. What happens is software engineers start coding. As you code, you pass that to the testers. Testers start looking at it, see if something is wrong, right away pass it back to the developers. So developers check it again, fix what is being mentioned, hand that over again to the QA. So I can guarantee that this happens multiple rounds, right? My experience is minimum 2 cycles for each and every story that you hand over to the testers will come back to the developers. 2 times minimum, right? So the situation might get worse when the scenario is not well understood, scenarios are complex, and testing strategy is not clearly defined. The developers, the problem with the developers is this, right? So developers in our education system,
Yes, I think we kind of lost the connection with the Niroshan. But yeah, until he gets back, just a kind reminder to join in for tomorrow's session as well, as there are 2 amazing industry experts that will be joining us in our sessions tomorrow as well, namely Sachit Pereira and Jimhani Pereira, who will be touching on the topics quality approach for MVP development and an in-depth guide on usability testing. We also encourage you to participate across the other sessions, not just tomorrow, but as Quality Week always tends to bring in industry experts to enrich and enlighten the experience that you have the current experience that you have and take it to further extremes so that you can succeed in your career. Also, a kind reminder regarding the feedback regarding the surveys. So if you can please take some time to fill out the survey forms that will be shared in the chat, as well as will be mailed to your registered email at the end of the sessions. This is so that we can gain some insight and get more feedback on how to improve our quality week sessions further, so that they benefit you and add some value, add further value to your experiences. Yes.
Hello.
I think Niroshan is back. Yes, Niroshan.
I'm really sorry. I think I'm back with a bit of positivity. So I got the power back. So hopefully, yeah, so I can continue from here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Over to you, Niroshan. We can hear you clearly.
Yep. So I'll share the screen as well. Give me just 30 seconds. All right. Can you confirm you see my screen, everyone?
Yes,
Yes, Niroshan, we can see.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I was here, right? So I spoke about what Agile means, and basically, being Agile testers, what we are saying is, hey, we are ready to be responsive. It's at a strategic level, at a company level. That's all what the stakeholders need, right? You can forget about all the technical jargons around agility, but if you remember, hey, this is all about being responsive. You will ace your game as quality teams, right? Quality assurance teams. Now, from there, if you look at why people be agile, why they are trying to be agile, there are multiple reasons that people report they want to be agile, right? Out of all these reasons, definitely software quality is one of the key factors, key reasons why people, organizations, teams want to be agile. Because agile will give you the right foundation as well as the framework with the right set of practices to do your testing job effectively. Now, again, remember, being testers, you are not just doing anything different other than software engineers and other people around you, right? You are basically trying to synergize with them to achieve the common purpose, common goal. That is being responsive to optimize the value delivery, right? Now, with that, if you ask the question, hey, what sounds like an agile mindset, right? So there are multiple angles that you need to tackle in the modern days. One is you got to think that, hey, we are based on empiricism. As I told you earlier, empiricism is three things: transparency, inspection, adaptation. One other thing is, remember, your development should be primarily test-driven. What it means is, you have a test-first mindset. You write your test strategies and test cases even before you start your coding. Why? It allows you to validate what the customers want in terms of the behavior and the functionality and the non-functionality in the code that you are trying to develop. Otherwise, what we do is we develop something and then ask the question, hey, let's test this for what the users want. So it's not going to work, right? So you write your requirements after talking to your clients and users, validating their expected behavior. So your test cases, your test strategy should reflect that, right? The third is, it got to be inbuilt. Now, remember, quality is not something external. If you think that it is something external, you're going to certify being a test team, is not going to work. What does inbuilt quality means? The team, right? If you have a team comprising 3 software engineers and 3 QEs, so quality engineers, 6 people together got to own the quality. It's not quality engineers' job anymore, right? Quality engineers are accountable to validate the quality. The quality is a collective responsibility, and it is inbuilt. It is supposed to be inbuilt. That means when you produce a piece of code, that got to have the right quality. The other one is self-managing cross-functional units got to collaborate, right? Why it's self-managing? No one is going to come and tell you what to do. You got to figure out what to do based on what the users expect from you, right? Why it has to be cross-functional? Cross-functionality is the most important perspective when it comes to the modern world, right? How? Being a team, you should have all the necessary skills to produce the valuable outcome. You can't be dependent on too much outsiders, right? Example, architecture, right? So if you thoroughly depend on architects outside, right? Who maybe, 1,000-member team has just 5 architects, it's not going to work anymore, right? The architecturing needs to be part of the team. Similarly, there are various other competencies that one single team needs to have to be a high-performing team. So you got to evaluate that and ask the question, do we have those cross-functionalities, cross-competencies, right? The next thing is it's about adaptability. Remember, if you want to succeed in the modern world, right, you got to be you got to develop adaptability, your ability to adapt. Now, even today, right, what I'm going through is a disaster. I can call it a disaster because, see, I never expected any of these things, right? How well I could manage the situation, how well I can still deliver the value to you is what I got to do, right? And, I never thought I'm going to get power also. So I was trying to manage it and then, something again happened, right? So this is exactly what happens in the business world. How do you face it is what you got to do, right? What you got to start thinking deeply. Focused on continuous value delivery. Remember, the value delivery is not one-off thing anymore. That means if your project is 3 months, you can't wait until the 3 months is over to deliver value. Starting from the very first week, you need to start delivering value. That is continuous delivery, right? And every week, you got to deliver something significant, something valuable to your end users. Otherwise, they're not going to be happy, right? Focused on MVP. And remember this now, whenever I do a transformation, agile transformation, this is the first concepts that I bring forward with the strategic leadership, right? There's no any transformation happen in my life, my journey, without working towards MVPs. MVP stands for minimally viable product, which is well known, right? But the thing is, it's not utilized effectively. So remember, these concepts got to be there if you want to be testing in the agile way, right? And then from there, there are 3 perspectives that I want to highlight to validate if you're agile or not. If you're not agile, you will see that you will have siloed teams. That means you claim you are software engineers, another group claim quality engineers, right? In this case, it will be you. Quality engineers, and there might be subgroups as well, like UX, UI, DevOps, all that, right? So these silos got to be avoided. If avoiding is not the possibility, then you got to minimize them. Remember that. Another malpractice that you see is testing is considered as a phase. Now, it's not going to work. That means you wait until the development is over to start testing. Don't do that. It's not going to work. Development and testing has to be sync really well. It's real time. You develop one single line of code that got to be tested, right? Who tested is a different question, right? The initial testing got to be done by the developers because they are responsible for their code. They are accountable for the quality of the code that they write. Once they are confident that this code is written the way that works and right level of quality, then pass it to testers, right? So I'm going to give you a few strategies to ace on this area. The third malpractice is so many defects produced in a sprint. Now, question, go back tomorrow, right, or day after the, talk. As soon as you go to your backlog, right, you look at your previous sprint, few sprints, and look at the number of defects produced in every single sprint. I can tell you one thing. If you're not agile, you will see that you have produced so many defects in every sprint. Now, here is my observation, right? Whenever I start coaching most of the teams, the defects count within a 2-week sprint is 20 plus. What does that mean? Like, you are just tackling 10 stories and you're producing 20 defects, right? It's not going to work, right? So if you see that, you've got to fix it. I'm going to tell you how to fix it, right? So from there, right, I'll tell you how it works, right? So I told you, so this is a typical workflow, development workflow. So you have developers, you have dev in progress, you have code review, you have dev testing, you have dev tester. 4 statuses for developers, right? After dev testing is completed, then you pass it to open QA, and QA has a column called open to QA. So they have multiple stories queuing up in the open to QA columns. So they haven't picked them up, but it is for QA, right? Then they start testing. While testing, they basically reopen the same story again and again, multiple cycles, pass it back to the developers. Trust me when I say this. By fixing this area, I managed to reduce the number of defects produced in a sprint by 90%. What does the numbers look like? You produce 20 defects in a sprint and it reduced to just 4, right? So even not 4, like just two defects per sprint, right? How can you do that? I'm going to talk about that, right? So this is a traditional siloed testing or development workflow. So you have multiple statuses allocated for developers. You have multiple statuses for QAs, and they don't work together. They work in different two silos, right? And I'm just talking about what's wrong here. One, siloed dev testing. Developers are totally isolated in a silo. They do their testing alone, right? Second, siloed QA testing. QA does the same, right? They wait until the developers say we are done, then pick it up. Do the testing alone, right? If they find any defect or any issue, pass it back to the developers. Developers work alone again, right? What's next? Another problem. There's a traditionally, it's sad to say, there's a war between devs and QAs, right? And here's the thing. In most of the unhealthy teams, no one is having the courage to call it. You just live it the way it is, right? Because you don't want to be a problem creator. You feel like, picking these issues between devs and QAs and you're going to make a war, right? So I basically coach the developers and QAs to challenge that, right? And this is a big problem that you got to fix. The ultimate problem that you see in these siloed workflows is that you produce so many defects, right? And I assure you, right? So if you go back and check number of defects produced in every single sprint, it's more than number of stories, definite thing, right? And if you have fixed it, congratulations, you have done a great job. If you haven't, you're struggling, but you don't call it a struggle. You might find ways to celebrate, right? You may have a pizza party, just pretending that you are doing the best possible job, right? Maybe how do you do that? You work multiple extra hours just to meet your commitment, right? In my vocabulary, right? You shouldn't be working a single extra hour to become a high-performing team. That's how it works, right? If you commit to something, work 50% extra time to complete the commitment, don't call yourself a great team at all, right? When someone offers you pizza, just reject it because you haven't done your job properly, right? You're probably compromising a lot of things personally as well as professionally, and you're going to hit a bottleneck, a dead end very soon as a team, right? Because you are not doing it right. People will be exhausted very soon. They're going to leave your organization very soon due to the exhaustion that happens in their lives, right? So now I'm going to tell you how to fix it, right? Now, in a given case study, right, in a recent engagement that I've been working with, what we did was this. We gathered QAs and devs together, had a brainstorming session, asked a question. I put the question to them, how can we shorten the workflow, right? How can we optimize the workflow, streamline the workflow to avoid multiple rounds of dev testing, QA testing, rejecting, and refixing, etc. Right? So here's the trick, right? So I'm going to give you just 3 strategies, no complication here. Just 3 strategies for you to change your testing strategy and practices. Here are the 3 things. Number 1, right? The very first thing is something called pair programming. I'm sure every one of you would have heard of it. Here's the problem. You can't have pair programming implemented in Sri Lanka at this point because we don't have developers who are capable of doing end-to-end testing. 1, they're not trained. 2nd, they're not willing, right? Then again, you can't give it to the testers because they are not good at software engineering, right? Now, if I have worked with multiple Netherlands tech companies, just be surprised that they don't have separate QAs. They don't hire QAs, right? They just hire engineers. Then how do you do the testing? Engineers do the testing. Are you sure? Yes. How come? They're trained to be cross-functional. They're trained to be self-sustaining, right? The testing is not something should be done by someone else. It is your responsibility if you are the one to code. Due to the fact that we don't have that competency built within the country, we got to find a workaround. The workaround is pair testing. What does that mean? Here's how it works, right? You got to pair one developer with a tester. What does that do? Put these 2 guys together, right? In that case, it might be a girl and a boy, or 2 boys, 2 girls, whatever it is, right? You put a developer and a QA engineer together and ask them to collectively own the quality, right? It's then the finger pointing goes away, back and forth bug raising and bug fixing goes away. And here is how it works, right? Now, generally, between development and functional testing, there are multiple rounds of developer testing, right? QA checking, developer again refixing it, passing it to QA, all that. So in order to fix this, what we did was we actually put these 2 guys together and said, hey, until you are confident that the code that you produce, the story that you implemented is in good quality to pass to the functional testing, you're not going to raise any defect, right? Because no point raising a defect if you don't have a collective agreement that this is good enough, right? So we ask them, just work together, have constant calls in a virtual setup. If you are in a physical location, get them to sit together, work together, right? Do everything possible to ensure that the code developed is good enough to pass to the functional testing level, right? So what are the things that you do here? 1, you pair the developer and the QA, right? 2nd, make them accountable collectively. Tell them, if you find a defect at the functional level functional testing, it is your ownership, your problem. It's not an engineer or a developer, QA, right? Both of you got to own it. They code, write test cases, and develop a test together, right? So generally, what the QAs do is when the developers do the coding, they start writing the test cases. We ask them to sit together and do it together, right? Was it successful? Absolutely. That's why I said 20 defects produced in a sprint was reduced to just 1 or 2. it's consistent, right? So this is the first thing that I want to introduce, and I'm gonna finish in another 5 minutes. But listen, right? So these two strategies can change your game as a quality engineering team. The next thing is optimizing the workflow. So I urge you to go back, look at your workflow, challenge it. Have you evaluated your workflow? Have you looked at it and validated it, right? Are you confident that this is the most optimized workflow that you got to work on, right? I'm sure your confidence will not be so high. So what do? Go back, look at your workflow, brainstorm and ask the question, hey, what are the things that we can optimize, we can improve, right? One thing that you got to do is, as we discussed earlier, avoid the back and forth defect fixing. Focus on something called, this is an engineering practice in TDD, test-driven development, 0 bugs, right? There's a principle, there's a practice. So you focus not to produce a single defect in your workflow, right? It's a challenging goal, right? What I suggest is put a number, right? Put a benchmark and say, hey, now it's 20, let's reduce the number of defects produced by 50%, right? Then you bring it down to 10, again, bring it down to 5. Try to just have no defects produced in the sprint, right? And focus on reducing the lead time. So if lead time is basically the total time that you take in order to deliver something. When do you start a story? When do you deliver it? So the time between the starting point and the ending point is your lead time. So generally, this takes many days, right? Due to back and forth defect fixes, right? Refactoring, whatnot, right? So there will be a lot of things happening that doesn't allow you to close the story. So you got to focus on reducing that lead time, right? And remember the other thing, no mini waterfall. So generally, right, so this is 90% of time, 99% of time, I see that mini waterfalls within sprints. What does that mean? You start your sprint, you don't complete any story in the first 5 days, not even up to the 7th, 8th day. On the 8th day, all the stories are transferred to QA, and then the QA panic, right? Because QA surely know that it's not enough time for them to do a thorough test and complete their testing, right? So that's because of the mini waterfall. That means within the sprint, you run a waterfall, right? Phase by phase approach, just working on the development, not passing anything to the testing stage, right? So what you need to do is to start delivering or completing your stories on the very first day of your sprint. How do you do that? Pick up the smaller stories, smaller fixes that you're trying to do, right? As soon as possible, pass them to the testing stage, functional testing stage, right? And that will allow you to have a greater workflow, right? The last but not the least, you got to focus on test-driven development, right? Test-driven development is, one second. Sorry about it. Test-driven development is primarily focused on getting QAs involved in the early stage itself, right? So you can also go into BDD when you mature as teams. However, your starting point could be test-driven. You start writing unit test and then, move on to what I call is, BDD style acceptance criteria. Now, when you write the acceptance criteria, ensure that developers and testers work together to give the right input to the product ownership to write the acceptance criteria. Your acceptance criteria could be your starting point of your test strategy, test cycle, right? So when now BDD style is basically saying, hey, look at the behavioral aspect of the users, right? You start asking the question, hey, what is the behavior that the users expect? Then you have several formats that can be used. So you can use one format called give and then, right? Given I want to do this, then do this, right? So this is an extremely user-friendly, easy to adopt style that will support your test practices, right? Otherwise, what happens is your acceptance criteria is not written in a way testers can translate them into the test cycle, test cases, right? So all in all, my suggestion is that, just invest your time to evaluate the test practices that you go through. Look into these three perspectives, right? One, pair testing. This comes from TDD, pair programming. Since we don't have the right cross-functional individuals within our context, go for pair testing by combining or putting a developer with a QA. So if you have a 6-member team, try to pair always. That allows these pairs to work cohesively together, right? Second, optimize the workflow, because this is a must. If you haven't looked into your workflow, you have been doing a lot of things to optimize your test practices. I can guarantee that almost no impact if you don't optimize your workflow. So look into reduce the time that you are taking to complete something, avoid mini waterfalling, reduce or avoid back and forth defect fixes. Finally, work on test-driven development. Get the QAs involved at the early stage of your development cycle. Let the QAs work together with the product ownership and the developers. Let them start writing test cases together, right? You write the test cases early, but you do it alone. Sit down with the developers, do it together. That will improve your quality drastically, right? And then write acceptance criteria and VDD style. And this is definitely a game-changing practice. This will lift up your quality of the stories, lift up the quality of your backlog, which allows you to have a much better sprint planning session. And then later on, have a better test strategy and cycle implemented. All in all, this is all what I wanted to present. My intention was to give you high-level strategies than going deeper, because I see my honest opinion is that I haven't seen how every one of your teams work, but I can sense that as a culture, as a community, we are not matured enough in the modern way of testing, in the agile way of testing. We got to change a lot of fundamentals before we talk a lot of technical stuff, right? Now, this is exactly what I do when I start transforming teams and organizations. I don't overcomplicate it. I just look at the fundamentals and start fixing them. And when you fix it, things work, right? Example, in a recent implementation transformation, right? Many months long release frequency was cut down to weekly releases. How do you do that? Is through these fundamental practices, right? You start looking at your stories, looking at your backlog, ensure that team has a thorough understanding of what they're doing. Then let them come up with a proper strategy overall, right? In that strategy, testing is a critical element. If you don't have the right test strategy and practices, you will never, ever be able to optimize the way you work, right? So that's all. And I'm not sure whether you have any time left for questions. I'm sorry for the struggle that you had to go through due to my problems, but I hope the talk was somewhat meaningful for everyone. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Niroshan, for that amazing discussion. And thank you so much for being able to join despite the unforeseen events. And now, once again, we will begin our Q&A session. I already noticed that there were a few questions in the chat.
Sure.
But if you still haven't posted in your questions, please do so now, and I'm sure Niroshan will be happy to answer them. Niroshan, over to you again.
Yep. should we go through each question?
Yes, please, Niroshan. You can read them out and answer as you go. Yep.
Sure. The first one is from someone. Could you please show the second point related to what's not agile testing, since I missed it? Okay. The second point was testing performed as a phase, right? So if you look at how the teams work, most of the teams just wait until the development is complete to test something, right? It's not going to work. So this is where you form a mini waterfall within the sprint. Your sprint is 2 weeks, right? But you don't start your testing until the 7th day of the sprint. That is what I call, you just follow a phase approach, right? You do everything possible in the development perspective, make before something is testable. But there might be different dependencies. One, if you don't have stories, effective stories created, independent stories, you can't test, right? Then you have to say, until you complete these 7 stories out of 10 stories, you will not be able to start testing. That's a bad way of planning. Don't do that, right? Every story that you include in your sprint should be testable, and start it right away once the story is complete. I mean, the dev complete, right? And as we discussed, do it together, right? Just sit down with the developers and go through the test cases together, right? So that will validate what the developers do, because developers might work in a different way, right? Not critical as yours as testers. You think of all the directions, right? So this is why putting a developer and a QA together can make magic. Yeah, hopefully I answered that. The second question is, we have practiced pair testing in our current projects, but we felt it consumes time a lot. One QA member cannot do pair testing with 5 devs, not of course, right? Then always other devs have to wait and do the pair testing. At the same time, QA misses other testing tasks because QA was so this got to be planned, right? So ideally, one-to-one mapping, one-to-one pairing. So that's why I said our companies, our teams got to mature in multiple angles. One, first place, right? As QAs, right? Don't believe that manual testing is going to go a long way, right? If you are thoroughly focusing on manual testing, just be warned that it's going to be redundant very soon, right? Testing should be done by the developers, right? And you will see this, you will experience this, you will see what I'm saying here. If you apply to a software engineering job in a country like Netherlands, right? They don't emphasize on separate QAs. How do you do that? You got to just ensure that you restructure your team a bit. Ensure that, don't assign one QA for 5 developers. It's a guaranteed way to fail, right? QAs can't be superheroes, right? So if you expect doing testing for 5 developers work, not going to work. That's why I said pairing. 1 developer, 1 QA. So if you don't have that combination, you probably need to start discussing how to solve that, right? Some developers might be interested to develop the expertise on QA, right? Groom them, get them to learn QA strategies, QA practices. If any developer is willing to do that alone, just give that opportunity. In that case, 1 developer should be able to do it alone, right? But it's not going to be very short, right? Short term. So this is where you got to restructure. The next one is, what is best workflow that you suggest to have? Yes, the suboptimal workflow, right? So you can think further, but I'm not going to talk about that, the most optimal workflow. The suboptimal, the most optimal workflow at this point for us, being a testing community in Sri Lanka, knowing what's going on, right? What I suggest is cut off dev testing, siloed dev testing and QA testing, right? put these two statuses together and say dev testing with QA, right? It's just one step. So that is what I told you. Now, when we introduce this change, it reduced the defects by 90%, right? Drastically. That's a drastic change. You can see, you can imagine how much time and energy we save through that. That is how we managed to achieve weekly releases. Every week we do a production release. How? Developers and testers work together on the stories that they have committed within a given week and complete them within the week, right? At the end of the week, we say these are functionally tested. Got it? So again, just to summarize, the workflow that I suggest is basically cutting off or cutting down the workflow statuses to a minimum number of statuses, mainly working around dev testing, eliminating dev testing, right? Putting devs and QAs together and making it pair testing. And okay, so a few more questions, a lot of questions. Thank you for them. Nicely done presentation. I'm glad you say that despite the challenges I went through. Thank you for that. Do you think that pair programming concept would come near future and companies will? If I start coaching, I'll right away introduce this, right? And see, search this term. What is most optimal is mob programming, MOB programming, right? Then pair programming. Mob programming is entire team work on a single story. You don't go to the second story until you complete one story. Trust me, this is the practice that you got to adopt, right? But it's not easy, right? The moment I say, people panic, leadership is like, really? I say, yes. Then it sounds like, everyone else is wasting their time, just two guys are working. No. That's how we think as a culture, right? We got to be more engaged in the process, right? So pair testing works for sure. Trust my words. Try to research a bit further. Talk to me offline. I'm happy to kind of continue that discussion with anyone interested. It's definitely a great strategy and a must implement strategy in my coaching engagements. Nowadays, there are two types of people involved in testing, as I know. Quality assurance and quality engineers. Can you differentiate the roles and which role is suitable for the paired approach which you mentioned? It doesn't matter for me, right? So quality assurance engineers would thoroughly focus on testing. Quality engineers would be focusing on the engineering practices as well, coding itself, going into automation, etc. Either way, right? So if you are involved in a team, ensure that you show up and demonstrate the best possible value, right? How do you do that? If you are good at engineering, own it, be accountable for it, right? What you do in that pair is something that you can design. But the overall goal is a software engineer and a quality engineer put together work towards a common goal. That is completing the given story the most effective way with the shortest time possible with the best quality, right? If you have that, what you do within that is subjective, right? You can design that based on your competencies. And remember, automation is a really, really great area that I believe every one of you should get into at one point of your career. If you have that, you are gonna change your value proposition significantly as well. And then we have another question: assign one QA for one developer will increase the project cost significantly. Not really, right? So I mean, if you don't, now here's the thing, right? In most of the Sri Lankan companies, we have like what's the combination? 2 developers, 1 QA. Tell me, are you happy with that mapping? Aren't you the one who is compromising your personal time at the end of the sprint, right? How do you fix it? You need to look at the right composition, right? And if it works, right? But if it doesn't work, you got to fix it. My experience is 2 to 1, 2 engineers to 1 QA does not work, right? It's impossible. That is why I say, look at it in a different perspective, right? So if you build up a team, build up it in a way, you build up the pairs. And gradually you should be able to get rid of the separation. That's my hope, right? My hope is that in another 5 years to come, we don't have separate engineers and QAs. We have software engineers who are qualified to test. We have quality engineers who are ready to code, right? So that's the purpose.
Sorry for the interruption once again. So we have time for just one last question.
Sure.
Yeah. So hopefully.
What do you want to pick?
I guess that's up to you. I'll leave that up to you, Niroshan.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Right. And do you think, as you can think or the mindset? Okay. Do you think software engineers can think from the QA mindset and do both manual and automate testing? I would say, it's a tricky question. There's no direct answer. This is a workaround. Remember, this is a workaround. Now, being quality professionals, quality assurance engineers, here's what you got to understand, right? Your job is to ensure that you contribute towards the software quality. There's no question. How do you do that? You have manual testing, you have automated testing, right? And the world is moving into a direction where we start saying, hey, we don't need this separation. We want cross-functional teams. We want cross-functional individuals, right? This is where software engineers got to develop that mindset, being ready to do the testing themselves. Got it? I'm not sure anyone from GapStars is here. If you know that, and you would confirm that there are people working for Netherlands companies, right? And then software engineers, you don't have testers. You got to do everything, right? So this is the mindset we need to go into, right? Even at Vetstoria, that's where I work at this point. We try to transition from these 2 different silos into that way of working. How do you do that? You got to do 2 jobs, right? One, train the software engineers to think like quality engineers. Second, you need to educate and develop your quality engineers to think like engineers and let them understand that their job is not just to look at a code done by someone else and just validate it, right? But have more involvement. Got it? So it's both ways. Software engineers at this point, my dear, does not have that mindset, of course. It's rare. There might be individuals who have that. But I suggest, if not fully, you have some level of competencies. And finally, right, remember this. As a professional, as a quality professional, as a software engineer, you got to develop something more than one vertical competency. One vertical competency is just focusing on one expert area, just forgetting everything else. It's not going to work. How does it work? You have one vertical, multiple horizontal competencies. QA could be considered as one of the key horizontal competencies. That means you're a software engineer, right? By profession, by expertise, but you are also good enough on quality assurance practices. That way, I can guarantee you, right? If you can say that, hey, I'm a software engineer, but I'm ready to test the code, you're doubling your value right now. If you are earning 400,000, you can simply claim double of that. That is 800,000 Sri Lankan rupees. Yeah. So with that, I'm going to end it.
Yep.
And
thank you very much. Go ahead. Yeah. All right. Thanks again, Niroshan. Thank you so much for the amazing topic and also for sharing your personal experience to our attendees. I'm pretty sure they now have something that they can take back into their own experience and implement in their own work life. So once again, let me take this moment to remind you to participate in the sessions that Quality Week has to offer over the upcoming days. And also, please take some time in order to provide your valuable input and feedback on the survey that we will be mailing to your registered email address. And with that, let me thank our keynote speaker, Rasika, one more time, and our second motivational speaker for the day, Niroshan. Despite your unforeseen event, you managed to pull it through, and we really appreciate that from our perspective. And I would like to also thank each and every one of you who joined today. I know that we have exceeded the time limit, and yet you guys stuck all the way through to the end. So thank you so much for that. And with that, I guess we can wrap things up for today. So thank you so much for joining day 1 of Quality Week 2022. Hope to see you all in the next few sessions, and have a good night, everyone.